So I'm very honored and pleased to be with these artists today. We had one more panelist, Hugo Armstrong, who is an actor from the theater school. I'm not sure when he graduated, what year? It's in the program. He represents something really central to our CalArts mantra, which is to be a citizen of the world. To be an interesting artist is to be an interesting person. To be a committed, passionate artist is to be a committed, passionate person. Hugo couldn't be with us today because he's helping people in Northern California who are having their lives ravaged by the fires. So unfortunately he couldn't be with us, but I think he's a model that we really want to emulate and applaud. So that's my kickoff, and I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. I think I'm going to start with Timothy, and Timothy's going to introduce himself very briefly.
Yeah, Timothy Garrett. I graduated in 2008 from graphic design, actually.
And you met Jared because?
I was actually Jared's RA my senior year, his freshman year. And then, yeah, friends from there, and then reconnected for the film.
And the film that we're going to discuss that sort of galvanizes all of these artists is called Shooting in Vain. It's a project Jared's going to talk about. He is the generator of the project. And what did you do exactly with the film, with Tim?
I designed the film poster, so we started with the type treatment, and then that kind of snowballed into the poster itself. But there was a lot of discussion there about what it meant for the film.
He also made my production logo, so, you know, that thing.
So if you need anything.
I hate you. I'm going to use the ugly word, and forgive me if this is an offensive word to anyone, but he branded your...
Yeah, I did. No, I work on that every day. So I'm a creative director at a marketing agency for film and television, so I'm branding all the time.
And Bob?
I'm Bob Allaire. I'm Robert in the program. Professionally, I'm Robert, but you can only call me Bob. And I'm a film composer. That's all I do. And so I did the music for Shooting in Vain. And I was here. I did my MFA in composition. I graduated in 2009, which is longer ago now than I would have thought until I thought about it.
And you remain connected. You work with my colleague in the experimental live action program in the film school, Betsy Bromberg. You were working with her in
I scored segments of her last two films. She heard my work because I was in one of her classes, and I had done I did a score for an experimental film for one of her graduate students, and she ended up asking me to do some music for her last two films. She told me, I believe, that I was the first composer she ever actually just hired, and usually she would get sound from people and she would lay it into the films kind of herself and manipulate it and do that. There was one section of one of her films, and she said she didn't really know, she had no idea what to do. Would I at least watch it? And I said, sure, and I watched it, and I said, this is what I would do. I would do string quartet. She says, okay, will you write it? And I said, okay.
That's a huge compliment because I know that it's very precious to her, that part of the work.
I love working with her. It's been really great.
And were you intending to be a film composer, or were you going to be a concert artist?
I would say that was always kind of... I don't know that I knew exactly where my musical path would take me. I think it would be a little disingenuous, though, to say it wasn't always, at least somewhere in the back of my mind. I love film, I love stories, I love... and I often have found that if I'm just trying to write a piece of music on my own, I don't always know where to start. And so working with someone like Jared on a film score, you have something there to inspire you kind of from the beginning. And then from there you can spin off and do whatever crazy madness your heart sort of calls you to do. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jared Januschka. I graduated from the theater school in 11, and after that started, kind of getting into film stuff, and I directed and produced the feature film, and got to, I don't know, it's funny, last time I saw John, we actually were talking about kind of like the culture of like CalArts and, different ways of looking at like alumni community, and for me, it was funny because like, definitely taking that big next step to being like, oh, we've done a lot of commercials and like short films and things. And then all of a sudden it becomes like, huh, now you need to work with just like 50 people. Where are you going to get them from? Who's going to be able to like speak your language? And so it was really nice to be able to come back to people where like, sorry, this is longer than a mini intro, but just once again, people who you pretty much have like one conversation and you're already like on the same page just because you have so many similar frames of reference, and there isn't really a push or like a micromanage. It's just sort of like, oh yeah, you're good at what you do too. Great, let's go do this. So yeah, it was really a blessing to work with everyone. And with all that said, here's Prerna, my production designer.
Hi, I was the production designer. I was in the theater school, graduated in 12, and I've been doing films ever since. So it was almost like a natural collaboration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we met for my interview, and it was just very simple, very like, oh, this is what I think, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's it, and then we just started like talking off of each other. It was awesome.
I remember how you actually like had a bunch of photos, being a great, professional that she is, of like what her vision was actually going to be for the film. So when we sat down, it was really easy to be like, oh yeah, that's a lot better than what I was thinking. So yeah, of course I'm going to take credit for that. You're hired. So yeah, it was really lovely.
So that's the sort of essence of collaboration, isn't it? That it takes your vision and expands it, and you use their skill and talent to enhance and grow past your initial vision.
Completely. I mean, when Bob and I sat down to do cues, I had all the times marked out, and I was like, oh, man, I'm probably going to have to like convince him to do this, like here or there.
Can I interrupt
Oh,
you?
yeah, please go.
So it had started as, I need a little bit of music, maybe just a little bit here, a little bit there, and it was going to be a very contained project. And then I watched the film, and I said, he's actually he doesn't realize he probably needs music here and here and here, and I mapped on all these other places, and it was actually quite a substantial amount, as it always is. I have actually had this experience many times working with directors. Oh, no, just a little bit. Like, no, it's not. And then we sat down together, and it was amazing. It was all the same spot.
I was just underselling it.
Is there a commonality in the way you communicate your art to each other because of your coming from the same space here, even though you come from different métiers and different programs? Was there a sense of aesthetic language or?
I mean, I feel like it's funny. Like if we go into like the logo for like shooting band, it's sort of, I don't know. It's weird because I feel like if you were to try and like intellectualize it, then it becomes this really tough thing because it's like, how do you, I don't know, say what you've been through or what you like. But then when it came time for me to be like, well, I'm kind of looking for like these qualities, and then
Yeah, I think as far as the poster is concerned, when it came down to make it, it was really just talking about like what the idea of the film was, and there was a kind of an understanding that like, oh, you're from CalArts, you understand that there's a lot of thought that goes into making a visual metaphor and creating something for people to connect with. And here are some screenshots of the actual film, but I don't know, there was just kind of an understanding, I think maybe a bias toward CalArts where you have this training, this unspoken understanding of creating art.
I don't know if any of you were in the last session, but there was a discussion about experimental film. I represent the film school that actually has actors in the frame and is the more conventional stuff. But that sense of experimentation and opening the margins of what narrative and/or film can do is still embedded in our DNA here at CalArts. So all of you experienced a demand that your work never look like anybody else's work anywhere else, that it be really, and this is an overused word, but authentic to you, right? So did you find that there was a certain kind of recognition that this may not look like anything else, but you're going to be open to whatever the other artist gave you?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, just knowing that we had gone to CalArts together, I knew that it was going to be something that was a bit more thoughtful than what you would necessarily see in the mainstream.
How did it affect your work?
It's really different if you're working in LA and then when you go for interviews and you know what to expect, or like, you make it more commercial, kind of, sorry. But you're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm gonna do with colors and this is what I'm gonna do, like these are the pictures. But like with Jared, I knew he's from CalArts and I was like, oh yeah, we can just keep talking about it. And
Yeah.
it's a different language almost, and we can tap into each other's sort of essence really about what we are as people, and then it goes from there.
There's like a really funny, odd sense of like trust you get also when you're like, well, this person's a genius, so I'm just gonna like throw them into the flames, and they'll probably figure it out. We are like the big final scene of the film. Well, we had actually planned out like a different house that we were gonna use, and then at the last second we got this incredible location, literally from a woman who was just like, oh my God, your story and just being around the film is so lovely. And so she's like, come up. And I remember giving Prerna the call of like, hey, so that house you've been dressing for about 3 days, yeah, you should come check out this other one. And then just watching her literally in the split second being like, all right, getting her crew and going through and being like, here are the metaphors we've talked about, here's all of the overall like artistic principles we've already created, and then completely taking it to a new space and being like, this is how it's going to work in the new framework of the film. And really taking that agency was wonderful for me because, it came out great.
That's his version. I was just like, oh my God, no! I was like, wait, okay, so I haven't slept, now we have a new location, and I have no idea how it looks, but I guess I'm gonna trust him and just be like, okay, I'm gonna go see this, and with an open mind. We have an hour before shoot, it's the final scene of the film, it's like the most important. And there was a Walmart, that was the only thing that I had in Pagosa.
Oh, we were filming in this really remote city that's like 6 hours away from anything in a valley surrounded by mountains. So yeah, there was a Walmart.
That's, pretty much all I had. So I was like, okay, fine. But once I entered the space and I saw what he was talking about, and then it just happened, like it just somehow just comes together.
Well, I want to show some images of the work. We're going to pull up first. Let's see.
I saw her click back that way one time. It seemed to work, which is, I feel counterintuitive, but.
There we go. So, can you tell us a little bit about these images?
These are all from different projects that I've done. This one is from a feature that's coming up. It's got Luis Guzman and a few other actors, and this one is from CalArts, the big skeleton, obviously.
And you saw those images. Anything you want to address from any of them?
I think I really liked puppets while I was at CalArts, and even in the set design program. My thesis was a puppet show, and then I got this other thing, which was the puppet show that you saw. It was for a web series for Subway. So we got to create this amazing world where it's an Italian bread loaf, and he wants to make it big in Hollywood, and he lives in a bread box. So it was really funny. It was amazing. It was a lot of fun, and we had to create these miniature sets. And we worked with a lot of people from Jim Henson Foundation. And they were like, yay, hi, 18 inches. So I got dollhouse furniture and then repurposed that and made the entire world for him.
Can you talk a little bit about what your job is? I'm sure it changes project to project. Could you talk a little about job?
Production design, you're in charge of the visuals of the film. It depends on each director and how they want to do it. Sometimes you're also collaborating and in charge of costumes too, or you have a say sort of, but some people do it differently. But overall, the visuals of the film, everything that's in frame, props, a picture frame, a coffee cup, everything, and how it harmonizes, that's the word, harmonizes with what the cinematographer is trying to do, and what his lighting looks like. And yeah.
I'm going to try this again and see if I can. This is Hugo. Give you a chance to see some of Hugo's work.
What's funny is I met Hugo actually through doing Tai Chi here, which was a long program, and we became friends through Sherry, and I saw a lot of his theater work when he was the guy just constantly. It's like having Hugo on set. But, no. I mean, that's from, what is it, Poor Dog Theater Group, which is another alumni collective that does theater. And so, yeah, Hugo's just an amazing talent to work with. He's going to be coming out in like the next Denzel Washington movie. But he's just one of those people where you meet him and like, most people would be crazy like, oh, I'm doing this. But with Hugo, you find out about it like months after it's happened. And he's like, oh yeah, that happened. And then he just moves on to doing something else, which, once again, the guy's really incredible. Obviously, he's right now up there volunteering his time. So
Humble,
oh yeah,
humility.
Most of,
But
yeah.
bold and brazen. So as an actor, you're an actor.
Yeah.
Directing another actor, was there, again, an unspoken language, or were you, what were your feelings coming into working with someone who has that kind of ferocity?
For me, like, especially working with a lot of the actors, I felt like, just from my experience of acting, that a lot of times it's sort of like people are trying to get you to like do a performance, which seems a little bit kind of cockeyed to me. Where for me it was more like, hey, let's just see what happens. We've got this amount of time. You know, we've talked about the character. You don't need to hit any real specific beats or anything like that. If I need to change it, I'll do it in the edit. And so, you know, let's have at it and have some fun. And Hugo was just completely all about that. He showed up, gave me a bunch of different, basically, shades on the character. Really made some wonderful choices, and it's really a pleasure. So,
Am I hearing, team, that this is a filmmaker director who has galvanized a great team and then sort of allows you to address the work from your own creative space? Is that what I'm
Definitely,
meaning?
yeah. I think personally I like to have some sort of inspiration from who I'm building for, but a lot of it he left open for interpretation, showed me the film and kind of let me take it from there. And initially from the first pass, he was like, yep, that's it. So it felt really good to work with somebody that just kind of understood that I was going to do what I needed to do. And then even with the logo that we created for his production company, he showed me, essentially it was like one image, but like two images of the same type of style, where it was just, you know, a human form made out of paint smears. And that was kind of what he envisioned for what his logo would be. And again, let me take it from there because he had already seen what I had done with the poster. So he's like, I trust you, man, do it. And that felt good, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, you know, especially I would say in, you know, some of the projects I've worked on, very often the director, when it comes to music, there's a joke out there, which is that every person on a movie has two jobs. Their job in music. 'Cause everyone's got an opinion, because I think it's one of those things, you know, if you have tastes about music and you have opinions about music, it's very easy for you to weigh in and say, oh, well, it should be heavy metal there, or whatever it is. So very often with directors I've worked with, it's you know, there's a very sort of narrow view of what things should be. And with Jared, and I would say this probably applies to a lot of people at CalArts, there's sort of a realization of what something can be as opposed to what it's supposed to be. And what I found was, yeah, he was just very trusting. I think he was probably the most hands-off collaborator I've ever worked with. And so when he then, you know, I was telling him what I was up to, and it was the music I did is not really like anything I think I've done for anything else. And so when I told him, hey, I cut up some old socks and I put them in my piano, taped them up in my piano, and have been breaking things, like just banging on things, and how does that sound to you? He's like, oh, it sounds great, let's just keep at it. And I'm like, okay, well. And it was very freeing in a way. I mean, it's very nice to be able to chase your instincts in that way.
The film is called Shooting in Vain, V-E-I-N.
or V-A-I-N, we changed it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, either
So-
way, it's provocative. Can you talk to the title a little bit?
Sure. I guess a couple things for me is like, when I came into making the film, I read in a book somewhere that like, if you're gonna like produce a movie, you should like, I mean, I think it's probably just part of being a good human being, artist as well, but like, you should make it about something because, you know, then it's actually got something to it, why people are going to want to watch your movie. So our film definitely raises awareness about kind of the opioid epidemic in our country. And it does it more in a narrative format where less like a documentary, something more where, for me and my own kind of experiences of knowing people that have dealt with it, it's so much of like an emotional sort of attachment. And basically, I think also with just the media, you're either kind of like glorifying or demonizing drug use. And I really wanted to make a film that's going to speak to pretty much like teenagers and people in their early 20s that would be the most susceptible to be like, I'm going to try that. But I figure if I, you know, kind of make a film that in a lot of ways can act as like a cautionary tale without becoming too pedantic, then it's, you know, something other people want to be a part of. And so, yeah, I mean, with that, I felt really, I guess, like empowered as like kind of more of a producer to find people that I thought were really going to kind of take themselves to the project and not quite look at it so much like, oh, here's my next freelance gig, you know? And I'm really proud of what people have done. And, you know, I think there's also another element of it all where it's like, if you're going to be hiring people, well, then you should trust them. And if you don't trust them anymore, then you should fire them and get somebody you trust. And so, you know.
So that content, how did that impact your work, Bob? You heard this was the topic, you heard this was the mission of the film. How did it inspire you?
Well, I think, you know, what we try to do is because it's the topic is what it is, but it's very, very much told through the eyes of these characters. It's very, very much, I would say, a character study.
Yeah.
And very much sort of largely an internal story, mostly, I would say, about the main character. And so I tried very hard to draw out that sort of intimacy. So sometimes you want to approach a film with the music, and music can really transform the experience of watching a film. So sometimes you want to make it very big and expansive. And what I tried to do is I tried to kind of drill in very deep and make it very emotional, but also very vulnerable. And, you know, almost like you were, so the motivation behind, if I get very specific, the motivation behind the socks and the piano is you put the socks up, and I took the microphones, I got them really way closer than you're ever supposed to get in there. And I, you know, was playing stuff, recording stuff. And what it does is you muffle the sound, and you start to hear the piano creaking. You start to hear the hammers brushing against the felt. You get to start to hear all of these non-musical sounds coming out of the piano as you're hearing all of these musical notes. The idea being, here are people who were sort of perhaps broken in some way or very exposed. If I were to come at it from that sort of metaphor, I doubt that anyone listening to it is going to hear that creaking sound and say, ah, yes, this is, yes, vulnerability, yes, aha, I get it. You know, but there's something about it when you hear it that it says, oh, this doesn't sound healthy, or this doesn't sound like it's all put together. It sounds a little rough around the edges, and then you internalize that, and then you see all these things playing out, and it puts you kind of in that mindset.
That's great. I want to see, Tim, I think we're going to get some work from you.
Okay, great.
Would you speak to that?
Yeah, so this is actually the company that I work for. We do key art for feature films, television, and then this is actually a motion poster that I built for said key art. This one is actually a poster I created for a music video I directed. This is my best friend. I made a calendar series of all my illustration work actually on like a pinup style calendar. And then various companies that I've done work for. Lana Del Rey, I just recently did her cover art, Counting Crows. And a lot of these are very different in their style, just either photographic or illustrative.
But you have a lot of skill sets. You are a musician.
I am a musician as well, as Bob pointed out.
You're a filmmaker.
I am a filmmaker as well, so I've directed a lot of music videos. Actually, the Lana Del Rey album packaging was designed because I had worked with the video commissioner for the Love video years prior, directing a video for another band called Carney. So it all just kind of snowballed from there as well. But yeah, I wear many different hats. I've done video production or video direction, art direction, creative direction, a lot of it being based in illustration, and then from there going into, you know, more narrative-based.
What are some of your references or tools that you use when you're looking for the way into a project?
A lot of it is talking with the artists. If I'm building something for someone, graphic design in general is a lot about marketing and branding. So I want to kind of get a vibe for what is the product that we're creating at the end. But also just kind of getting a vibe for what's the tone here, what are they trying to say about it that I can kind of synthesize into what kind of visual aesthetic we're choosing. So with the Lana Del Rey thing, that was something that was obviously more photographic. It was based on the music video, and it was kind of this ethereal, dreamlike approach to what we're saying about global love or love in society. Whereas something for the Counting Crows, they actually came to me specifically for my illustration style, wanting something that was kind of this amalgamation of, you know, life on the road and what does that look like from like someone from the west or traveling across the country.
Are there any artists or influences in history that really have impacted you? Any visual artists or any sound?
I mean, a lot of film directors in general. Darren Aronofsky is a huge influence of mine. And actually, while I was here at CalArts, when the movie The Fountain came out, that was incredibly impactful to me. I think things that talk about loss always mean something to me. There's something about making that connection with people and understanding empathy, and that's the kind of movie you come out of feeling something or thinking differently about a certain topic. So Darren Aronofsky's always been someone like that. Danny Boyle, Alfred Hitchcock, a lot of the greats. And then visual artists, Keith Haring was actually who inspired me to get into illustration, at least the way that I choose to illustrate. And a lot of street art, so, you know, Saber One or Mike Giant, who's a tattoo/graffiti artist. Yeah, lots of different influences.
Any particular artists that are deeply influential to you?
I really like the playful style of Adam Stockhausen. He's done Budapest.
Hotel.
Yeah, Budapest Hotel, and I'm right now assisting Albert Wolski, who is a costume designer, but he's a 2-time Oscar winner, and he's the sweetest man. He's done everything. He's done Bugsy, he's done Road to Perdition, he's doing the new Brad Pitt movie. He's just amazing too.
You're learning.
Yeah.
You're learning from him.
I'm his assistant, so I just bring coffee and like drive him around. But it's nice and a stress-free job, and I don't have responsibilities. It's great.
But are you witnessing anything that you're?
Yeah, he's so calm, and the way he and I talk a lot because we're in the car a lot, and it's just he's almost. I grew up with all his movies, and it's just amazing to see him in person, and then be with him the whole day. And him talking to his crew and the way he, it's so funny when you're in a low budget setting or you're in a big $1 million like plus movies. It doesn't change. There's never enough money. But it's the way you talk to people is always the same. The way inspiration can strike you anywhere, and he's been through so much. Like I told him I worked on a World War II movie, a period movie, and he's like, period for you. And I was like, oh yeah.
Interesting. But he had a deep relationship to it.
Yeah, so it was humbling.
I'm hoping, Bob, this is you.
Seems plausible.
Let's see. And I have a big question for all of you, but let's see where we go here first.
I think we're just going to get a clip.
gradual process because you can overemphasize or tell too much to the audience, or you can support, or you can actually change the entire aesthetic of what's in the frame. Can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, well, I know that it's interesting because when you are a film composer and you get brought onto a film, usually most of the work has already been done. So, you're one of the last people to touch that project. And I know my opinion sometimes is if the music is wrong, you can completely destroy that project. And so I think it does require, your collaborators to have a lot of trust in you to not just completely mess it up. So there's a lot of principles of not saying too much, but also saying enough. That clip I love because you don't really hear the dialogue, and in fact, as it was first envisioned, there was no other sound. They had muted everything else. I had seen it with dialogue, and it's a very sort of disturbing moment that's happening. He's found out some information about. It doesn't matter. He's had a bad time, and the woman is chasing him and saying some stuff that is kind of dark and messed up and getting in his head. And I had initially seen it with all that stuff, and I scored it accordingly. And then they loved the music so much, and you didn't really need the dialogue. They pulled it all the way out. And I actually went to them and I said, well, I kind of loved the way it played, hearing some of those things she was saying, so I kind of miss it. And then they said, okay, well, we'll split the difference. And of course, then I watch it and you can't hear any of what you just hear kind of the buzzes. But it is you do have to be very mindful of what you're saying. But you also want it like, hey, look at me, I can listen to this cool music. So it's always a struggle.
What I love that you're all saying is that as artists, you see what's in front of you, you hear what's in front of you is happening, and you work with what is happening rather than what was fixed in your head. And I want to come back to that in a moment. Before we get to shooting in vain in depth, I want to ask one more question of all of you, and it's a two-part question. One is, when you were in school at CalArts, what was your definition of success? And now that you're not in school any longer, what is your definition of success personally and professionally? Jared, do you want to start?
Is this the provocative question?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So sorry,
That's
just
what
re-putting it back in my brain because I was kind of running as you were saying it. So basically, what's my
What was your definition? When you were here,
Okay.
what did you think success was?
Yeah, I was one of those kids when I was here that was just a weirdo. I mean, I shouldn't say weirdo. I mean, I was just very much focused on I'm going to be an actor. How the best can I do this? And blindly, I didn't really see a lot of the really beautiful people around me and what they could do until actually I got out and then started seeing really kind of what my own talents were and what my own interests were more than my own ego. And so I feel transitioning to the second part of that question, I mean, I guess success for me is really just getting to work with people that are incredibly talented, care about what you're doing, just because so many other jobs, I mean, that I've had to do, whether it's an artist or really anything, you don't really get that in life. So it's just been a pleasure to kind of share that company.
Are you concerned at all about words such as commercial or, versus the artistically? Does that impact
For me,
you?
it's sort of I want to have a commercial film because I want to be able to make another one. And the more commercial this is, if I can be commercial and get away with doing the things that really interest me, then that's a real success. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I kind of like the guy's joke before us about, selling out. So, yeah.
Sell out the Palladium.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Tim, success.
I would say while I was here, I didn't really, even coming into graphic design, I didn't quite grasp what graphic design fully encompassed. To me, it was, at least in my first year, I was I'd love to design clothing for, skate brands or something like that. That was the short distance of success for me. And then by my second year, I was designing t-shirts for Stussy and various brands. So I was oh, okay, so now I got to find a new thing to think that is success. And so I think I was thinking more objectively, now being out of school, and having done so many different things, whether it's video production or actual design work, success to me is just being able to every day do something creative and be compensated for it. You know, to be able to survive and still live a creative life, I think is a luxury that not a lot of people are afforded, and the fact that I'm able to do that, that to me is success. Yeah, the rest is just icing on the cake.
Yeah, well, I think when I was here, for me, it was about doing as many things as possible and collaborating with as many, interdisciplinary things as I could. So I wanted to do music for choreographers in this space. I wanted to do work with filmmakers, which I worked with a lot of the animators and kind of got started doing. That's how I learned how to do all this stuff, because when I started here, I said, how do we do this? I don't know. And then, yeah, it was kind of creating as much work as possible and kind of feeling out what that would be. Now, I would say that my idea of success, I feel like there are a few kind of things, and they very rarely all come together. One would be having an audience, having enough people see your work. Some of it might be being very proud of your work, believing in your work, and then the other one would be making lots of money. And I don't think I've ever had all three of those things come together. It's always been, maybe just one or two. The more proud of a project I am, maybe the fewer people see it, and there's no money. For a period of time, I was working on television stuff, and I think at Wednesday at 9 o'clock between two different shows, I think 11 million people were hearing my work. I don't think they were listening to my work, but it was happening to them. And but I wasn't necessarily very proud of that work. And so there's always this sort of struggle of how many of those things can I sort of gather together. And then, as always, if I can just digress briefly, there was a guest lecturer here for a while, the Don Moye of the Chicago Art Ensemble, percussionist, and he was fantastic. And I remember having a conversation with him where he asked me what I did. I told him I was a composer, and immediately he said, well, like, how are you going to make that work? What are you going to, that's going to be, and I'm sitting here thinking, aren't you supposed to be encouraging me or supposed to be doing all these things? And he's like, well, I tell you what, I got some advice for you. And I'm expecting to hear some artistic nugget of wisdom. And he says, you got to get that cash. Whatever you do, you got to get that cash. And I thought, really? That's the advice? And now that I'm out in the sort of real world, I'm like, oh yeah. Because as an artist, it's very easy to go and not make a lot of money. But sometimes you can, and I think balancing those sort of things is very important. And so if you can, when it's there, grab it, you stockpile it, and then you go for 6 months where the stuff you're working on isn't doing that, and so then you deplete it, and then you go and do it again. It's a very sort of maddening lifestyle, but I think many of us probably
to have a monetized practice just means that you continue practicing.
Yeah, exactly.
When I came to CalArts, I wanted to design for Broadway. Eventually head back into Bollywood or something, I don't know. But I came here and it was just surrounded by so many talented artists. It's really humbling. And for the first week, I did not speak. I was just so overwhelmed, and I was like, I'm going to observe. And I was not used to talking in class where everybody listens to you, because when in India you're like talking and the other person's going to talk louder, and then you're interrupting each other, and it's like a dysfunctional family. So when I was like, oh my God, everybody's listening to me, this is strange. But I got used to it, and I guess. But like what Rob said, it's all about success now is just making more stories. I'm bringing Albert, I'm basically driving Albert Wolski everywhere, but it's so humbling to be with him. And you just have to be the best at what you do. Like, you're either driving a car or you're like designing universal backlot street that you guys go in the tram. I did that, yeah, but it doesn't matter what you're doing. You get the cash from the Brad Pitt movie, and then you do work with Jared.
Well, speaking of which,
And then someday we both will have money.
Yeah.
that's right. And then someone out here is going to be working with you guys, and right? It's all going to. Do you want to? Should we try the trailer now?
Yeah,
Or
let's
do
see
you
if
want
it
to talk
happens.
about the film a little bit more?
Sure. So I
Can you
guess
tell us about the location? Because that plays a central character in the film.
for sure. So we filmed in a town that's the last movie they shot there was True Grit with John Wayne, and so everyone there was pretty excited about just like a movie being there. But then especially once Pagosa Springs in Colorado, it's near like Wolf Creek Pass. Once we got in there and actually started talking to the Chamber of Commerce and started working with the Sheriff's Department, you really learn how much of like an epidemic it really is, because in their town, I remember when we got a couple of EMTs that play EMTs in the film, and they were talking about how it's just literally every weekend, every other weekend, they're having to basically save kids' lives. And with the sheriff, it was a similar thing. And so, the benefit of it is really the whole community turned out. We got a lot of amazing locations. They pretty much just said, anywhere you want to film in the town, like it's yours. So they shut down major highways, streets, all sorts of things for us, which, especially coming up to do your first feature film is amazing, because the ability to not be like, all right, we got half an hour to get this scene, but to actually be able to plan things out was incredible. So that was a big blessing.
Anything else you'd like to say specifically?
I guess it's kind of funny, because I remember when we met, one of the kind of side things that I'd studied when I was here at CalArts was Deleuze and film theory. And it was funny because this whole kind of question of like, what is like the new, what is like the new form of, avant-garde, or I remember we were in the green room, Bob said that it's like YouTube. And I feel like there's so much, almost like an edge that you're always trying to like push up against, of trying to create something that's engaging and new, but also at the same time, making it like relatable to people. That I was, I guess, just going through the whole process, just super happy that I came to CalArts to actually have another reference point of being able to think of things differently, other than just like, oh, I want to go make a movie, so I guess I'll make something that's similar to what's in the movie theaters. And so for that, I'm pretty happy I came here.
Did you make this film for the big screen, the small screen, the small screen?
When we came into actually doing
The elastic screen.
the elastic screen, yeah. I don't know. When I came into thinking about like kind of shot progression and stuff, I realized like there's a lot of different size screens, a lot of different philosophies about it. I feel like people are even having just giant screens in their homes. When we started setting up like kind of like shot composition and things, all the stuff in the past is actually done more in kind of like a 50s or 60s style, where it's actually longer takes, wider shots, where when it gets to the present day, it does a lot more of that kind of like almost pseudo documentary where it's handheld. You might have an interesting way of coming into the scene, but then it's predominantly like over the shoulders, where you're kind of manipulating time and people's responses. And so, I didn't really think about that at all. I just thought about making a movie.
Well, it sounds like you thought about what does this moment need?
Pretty much,
How do I support the intention of the moment?
Exactly.
Should we look at it?
Yeah,
The
let's see what
trailer?
happens.
We're going to see the trailer. I believe we're going to take questions from the audience, but before we do that, could you, Jared, just speak to what you believe everyone at this panel contributed to your work?
For sure. I'll use that trailer. I guess going down the line, you definitely saw, I think for me also, like, when you're trying to sell a movie, you realize that nobody's going to watch it. They're just literally going to look at the poster and like how like even just the typeface is. And so getting somebody who's super talented at that becomes essentially like the representation of your work. And so you saw it at the very end what the actual typeface was and playing with kind of the motif of like the needle going down that's broken. So kudos to you. Pretty much Bob's music was all over that trailer up until basically our source song came in. And so it, once again, it kind of brings you emotionally into the piece, and everyone knows what music does. With Prerna, there's a few times where, she obviously affects every screen, but if you remember that really quick, party flash, she essentially made, a teen, Halloween party out of, a barren house in the middle of the woods, which looks simply gorgeous. And so, you can, it's great when you can see a designer that can, not only be like, hey, this is how a space, especially if you're doing indie filmmaking, you go into space and they're like, hey, we just need to, move this over here, and I don't know why you clear away the water bottles. And, and then also have another space where they come in and completely design the whole thing and say, all right, we're going to do all that on budget. So it was wonderful to have that support.
I suspect you all might work together again, if possible. Never, or never.
In fact, I'm just gonna go.
In fact, this is it. Goodbye, Apple.
Yeah. Good seeing you.
And the beauty of this is if you need another kind of artist, you can call any of these panelists, of any of these friends,
Yeah.
and they can turn you on to someone else, and the network just keeps spreading and the community keeps building. Is that fair?
Oh, completely. I guess for me, it's going back to that whole commercial question, there's almost a responsibility if you're taking investors' money to make a movie, and you're taking a bunch of people's time to go make a movie, that you try and make a movie that's going to be good. That way you can almost get back and be like, hey, we get to make another one. Here's another job. Now we're all able to move forward and,
Do what we love.
do what we love. Exactly.
And I think someone sort of alluded to, at some point, it's your responsibility is to give them an experience where they feel that their talents were valued and respected. And
For sure.
it sounds as if you did that in a really beautiful way. So, bravo, bravo.
We can do audience questions. Just raise, we have a couple minutes. Any questions, just raise your hand. I can get you the mic, or if you're loud, you can project.
I have a question as into the soundtrack. Who has influenced you, or what do you consider to be an exceptional soundtrack to a movie that you have seen?
Yeah, well, these days I'm finding I'm most interested in film, as far as film music goes, I'm most interested in people who didn't sort of come up in the traditional film scoring community. So people like Cliff Martinez, who's worked with Steven Soderbergh, but he was a drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers for a while, so he kind of comes at things from a different angle. Or Johnny Greenwood, those kinds of soundtracks where they're not necessarily thinking, oh, a film score sounds like this. It's strings and stuff. That being said, I also love that sound, so I do consider the best moments in film music of all time to be the final 15 minutes of E.T. No question. But I do really appreciate, or Trent Reznor, for instance, the work he's doing, stuff that is coming at these same problems from a different angle, instead of saying, oh, it has to be X, Y, Z. I'm actually going to do G, Q, 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering regarding putting the film music in, you said there were some places where you marked where this needs music. Was there any music put in as a placeholder before to give you an idea of what that music should be, or?
Yeah, it was really crappy. Sorry. It wasn't really crappy music, but it was funny because, remember how I had some stuff there?
Yeah.
And then we went through and we talked about it, and, for me, I don't know, a lot of times when I'm looking at, putting something in, it's sort of more like a signifier, just because, especially when you're starting to show cuts to people, they don't, you can be like, oh, and then you hear the sound of a door slam, and people will just, and so, when we went into that, I remember, I guess you could talk if you want to, but yeah. No, thanks. It was funny because, I showed him what my kind of reference track was because it had sort of like tones that I sort of enjoyed, but I'm not a virtuoso, I know shit about music. And so when it came time to talking to Bob, it was like, yeah, we can just throw that shit like out the window. I'd much rather hear what you want to do and what you want to create. And for me, like, I look at my job, like, these are the places, just because I also cut the movie, where music, I believe, needs to be. And once again, we were completely on the same page as far as that one, so.
I mean, you're talking mostly about like a temp score, essentially. There were important sections that had some songs in there, things like this. There actually weren't, I don't think, when we did the spotting session, I think, most of the spots I think we called out didn't actually have temp music in there, which is unusual.
So regarding not having parts that didn't have temp scores, is there an empirical approach that you have for finding ways to capture that suspense? Or
Yeah, part of it is if I feel like I'm missing something. One thing I've heard, I can't remember who said this. You watch a scene, and if it's at 100%, you leave it alone. If it's at 98%, you put that 2% in the music. And if I watch something and I go, this isn't 30%, then I know I have a big job to do, for that scene. So that's part of it. I tend to err on the side of holding back and not putting stuff in. So if something's kind of carrying itself, and this is actually a testament to the job Jared did, that very often, I know a lot of directors sometimes will shoot something and realize that they messed up, or the performance isn't there, or they're just unhappy with how it's playing, and they say, you know what, we're just going to throw music in there and that will fix it. And you can make a really bad performance or very garbage scene. I think you can make it passable, but you can never make it great. And you can also easily take a great scene and ruin it all the time. So I think it's a testament to what Jared did, that I very rarely felt, oh, we really need to put something in here. And anytime I did feel that it was, I could tell that it made sense for there to be something supporting the performance or enhancing it in some way.
Tell the Steve story.
So there's a love scene in the film, and when it starts, there's this song that a mutual friend of ours, and
Who's also a CalArts.
yeah, in fact, he's my best friend actually. He's a very good friend, and we were in a band together. And one of his songs is there during the love scene, and it's I watched this say it's this very intimate, kind of sweet moment, and then this song starts, this bam, hitting you. And I looked at Jared and I said, this might kind of be the wrong. I don't want to encourage you necessarily to throw out our friend's song, but it might be the wrong tone. And he said, oh yeah, I was thinking that. And so then of course a few weeks later, I'm having a drink with my friend, and I say, hey, so listen, you know how Jared talked to you about having your song in the movie? It might not be in the movie anymore, and I'm really, really, really sorry. And, but fortunately, we were able to get another song in, so it kind of bounces down.
Yeah. I just thought it was, since we're talking about collaboration with other CalArtians, it's only right that we talk about it, and Bob destroyed it.
You framed that now. You tore it
We
apart.
Oh,
talk
yes.
about Drew.
Yeah, I guess we probably should talk about Drew, shouldn't
Yes,
we?
and you guys have I think around 15, I counted, CalArtians that you guys put together. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if in the trailer it's not, probably it's like a second, so you might have missed it, but all the artwork, so the main character is an artist, and so we used Drew Foster, who's also a CalArtian, and his artwork for the main character. And then we three had conversations, Drew, Jared, and I, about what that should be. But yeah.
Was it original work for the film, or was it work he already had and you plucked?
A combination of both.
Combination.
Yeah.
So like the specific pieces, there's like an art gallery scene and all of that. Like there were specific pieces done in the film, and then some we pulled from what he had.
You curated.
Yeah, I curated an art gallery in Denver.
Question in the middle?
Oh yeah, I had a question for probably Jared or the team. Did you have any producers or maybe like executive producers, you know, like in movies that it feels like directors talking to what the executive producers are saying and then they're having that decision making and how the project is going? I was wondering if you had anybody almost overseeing the what you were doing or if you were doing it all on your own.
Yeah, that was a fun experience. Definitely learned a few things. Because the way I came up was doing a lot of these commercials and like internet stuff, and so I was able to have a much like stronger hand on the production side. And yeah, I mean, I guess I was smart with the way that I set up the whole thing because I was able to kind of keep my investors at bay, so I didn't necessarily have to answer to any like creative decisions. But yeah, learned a really big lesson about giving people titles and. Job delegation, but happy to be on the other side of the film and working with the people we have to work with. So
They weren't on set, so that was a great thing for
yeah.
One last question up in the front here. You're good? Thank you.
I was just curious, when I was looking at this school, one of the first things I heard was the CalArts Mafia. And you guys had 15, it sounded like CalArts working on this. How did you guys really get connected? Did you put out specifically that you wanted other CalArts, or what is it that brought you guys together since you're from different years?
Well, I mean, I'll just run through down the line really quick. So
Daniel Garrett, who was an actor, he mentioned you were looking for a poster.
yeah, I was looking for someone.
He just like tagged me in it.
Exactly.
And then he reached out.
And RA. Facebook, RA. When we went to CalArts together, we became friends just as like a side project. I can't remember how we originally met.
I don't actually.
Remember I produced a concert for you.
Yeah, no, I remember like these little
Yeah.
little things we did, and but I don't remember how we first met.
Another CalArtian actually connected us. His name was Stephen James. He is incredible. He stayed up weeks on end. He basically all the costumes that were like the significant pieces he like made by hand because we didn't have the budget to purchase them because that would have been like a couple grand a piece.
Yeah, he does like headdresses for Beyonce and like every music pop artist, and he did a lot with the rhinestones, and oh my god, he would like he would not sleep, and he would put each rhinestone on that dress, and I'm just like I don't know if I could.
Yeah, no, exactly. He took it to another level, but I was looking for a production designer who, because the one that I'd worked with previously was doing Pacific Rim over in China and couldn't come back to the U.S. And so it was kind of like one of those instances where it was like, turn back to the network. And Stephen really spoke highly of Prerna, so we met up and